think it shows that Putin, first of all, is concerned primarily with Ukraine, but he may have ambitions beyond that. But I think for sure that he's not interested in any kind of peace deal that doesn't involve the loss of territory for Ukraine. That is his priority, that he intends to get lands that have not been occupied by the Russian forces, particularly in the Donetsk region. I don't see necessarily from what he said in the last few hours that he intends to go further into Europe. I think he maybe, for now, with a peace deal, would stop at Ukraine, but he would leave Ukraine and other countries around, like the Baltic states, vulnerable to future Russian attacks if the deal goes through as Putin has demanded. I don't think there's much prospect of this deal being long-lasting. I think that the way it's framed right now makes it impossible for Ukrainian President Zelensky to accept. I mean, he's already said that territory is his red line. He will not give up any territory as long as he's president. Putin, on the other hand, is saying that Zelensky is not a legitimate president, his term has ended, and that Ukraine should have elections and get a new president, and then he would deal with the new president. So he doesn't even recognize the Ukrainian government as valid. And when you start out that way, I don't think there's much prospect for a long-lasting peace. Also, I think there's a problem with the US side in that it changes constantly its position on this war. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that Trump was saying that there was a good chance that Ukraine would win the war. Now he's simply saying that he agrees more or less that Russia can take territory before any kind of deal could be reached. And it also is using negotiators that are fairly close to the Russian regime, like Witkoff and Kellogg and others. They certainly seem a lot closer to Russia than they are to Ukraine. And they don't visit Ukraine. They simply go to Moscow to talk. So I don't see it being a long-lasting deal. I mean, right now, the Russian Security Council is fairly unified. They believe that they're winning the war, and therefore that Ukraine is not in a position to negotiate a reasonable sort of deal. They see themselves as the victorious party in this war, and therefore they're quite willing to wait maybe a year, maybe 2 years, or however long it's needed before Ukraine sort of gives in and gives them this territory in the Donbas region, admits that Crimea is lost and is de facto now Russian territory, and these other territories like Zaporizhia and Kherson are sort of divided where the armies stand at the moment. So I don't think there's much internal pressure on Putin. Economically, he's not in any kind of danger right now. The Russian economy is not collapsing despite the various sanctions. So Putin doesn't feel under pressure at all. And therefore, he feels like he's in a position to take a hard line, knowing that most of his leadership is behind him. I mean, the only factor that might affect Putin is age, right? I mean, he's already 73 years old. The question is he in good health? How much longer is he going to be there? But as far as I can see, he's not in bad health. He seems to be fairly fit. And certainly, he's got all his faculties there. So I think Russia's in a strong position from that regard. But if you take into consideration that in order to win all this territory in Donbas that Putin is asking for, given the present rate of progress, it would take Russia about 5 years to get the rest, because it's such a war of attrition. The Ukrainian cities on the western side of this region are fortified. They're ready for any kind of battle. So what Putin is asking for is a kind of short route to a peace deal where the Russians wouldn't need to do that much fighting. But on the other hand, if they have to do it, he's prepared to do it. Well, they could, in theory, yes. But, I mean, Russia's really a petro state right now. It relies heavily on oil and gas. And the price of oil and gas at the world level which reached a peak a few months ago and has gone down a bit, but it's not at a catastrophically low level. So as long as countries are prepared to buy this oil and gas to make up the shortfall of the Europeans pulling out of any kind of trade agreements, Russia is okay. And right now, both China and India are buying Russian oil, which is compensated for the loss of, say Germany and other countries that usually import Russian oil. Now, if that changed, either the price of oil fell, or China and India may be under pressure from the United States, decided not to keep buying Russian oil, then I think the situation would be different. Then the Russian economy would probably go into some kind of a tailspin like it did in the 1990s. But at the moment, that's not happening. And the Americans are not really adopting a hard line on people importing Russian oil and gas. I mean, it's come up every now and then in the conversation, but it's not been decisive. Trump has not laid down any kind of hard rules that China and India might follow. So for now, I think it's okay. And sanctions are not going to be particularly effective from the Europeans or North Americans, as long as that is the situation. Well, I think, the main risk is that if the deal is reached, maybe on the terms already offered by either by the American Russians or the Europeans, then many in Ukraine would not accept that deal. And I could foresee a situation where even if the Ukrainian army lays down its weapons, for example, there would be terrorist attacks on Russian-occupied points. There could be drones, there could be other means, even missiles, on Russian-occupied positions that could restart the war very quickly. And I think that is a big danger right now, that could happen. If there's a kind of, a long-term peace deal is signed. And also, the Ukrainian government may change at some point. You may get different leaderships. But I think the Ukrainian public in an election campaign would never vote in someone who's given up territory, 20% of Ukraine's territory, to Russian occupiers. It's not going to put them in any kind of good position. You would see a collapse, I think, of the Ukrainian government and maybe of the Ukrainian state itself. I don't think Putin would mind that, but for the Ukrainians, it would be a total disaster. And it wouldn't augur well for the Europeans either, because they're looking at Ukraine as a potential new member of the European Union, and a partner in the future, and are hoping to rebuild Ukraine when the war ends. So I think there's a number of difficulties, even if a deal is signed, that it would preclude it from being a long-lasting deal.